Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Ray Bonilla, and this is the Studio Bridge Artist Spotlight podcast. And I am so excited in this episode to be talking with Amy Erickson, incredible painter, who we haven't met actually ever in person or just corresponded at all. So this is the first time that we're chatting, but I've been a fan and familiar with Amy's work for quite a while on Instagram. So yeah, so before you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe the podcast and check out our episodes either on YouTube, where you can see all of our back episodes, or any podcast aggregator, Spotify or Apple Podcast, so on and so forth. All right, Amy, thank you so much for having just having us for this podcast and coming in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So you are originally from, are you originally from the West Coast? I know you're currently in the West Coast in Washington State. But where are you from originally?
I grew up in a little place called Edmond, Oklahoma.
Oh, right on.
In the Midwest.
Oh, nice. Okay. Right on. So did you go to school there, or what brought you out to the West Coast?
Yeah, I was raised in Oklahoma. I got my BFA at the Kansas City Art Institute in Missouri. And I lived in the Midwest between Kansas City and Oklahoma for most of my life. And then in 2018, I moved out to Seattle here to study at Gage Academy.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So did you study painting in Kansas City Art Institute?
Yeah, I did. I have a BFA in painting there.
Okay. And then were you always kind of into art? I mean, I was always into like comic books and things like that, but I realized when I got to school I didn't really know anything about art, and I was all of a sudden exposed to all of these like incredible artists, and I just broadened my horizon. So what kind of got you to like into painting, from the start?
I mean, I've always painted and drawn. It's just been something I've been really intuitively attracted to. Like I remember I have this memory of like there was this Sesame Street book for children with like a Sesame Street Mona Lisa picture, like Muppet character, and like seeing it as a kid and being like, what is that? Like I want into that kind of stuff. And then I didn't really have a structure for like how to pursue work until I like read this book on paint drawing in high school called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain that I
Oh
found at
yeah.
the local library, and did the exercises out of that book. And that was my first introduction to working observationally. Just like I was drawing, they teach you how to, see negative shapes and light and shadow, and like think in more of an abstract visual way. And I just like latched onto it. Like it was just the greatest thing.
And thinking about that, I was exposed to the of drawing from observation. It's kind of mind bending, right? Because never realized there was like an entire world there to reference. You were just sort of, drawing was a very kind of insular thing before that, at least for me. So it's that must have been, that's awesome. I remember that book. For me, it was like how to draw comics the Marvel way, and
Yes.
they were talking about how to like go outside, like, oh, go outside and draw your couch, to practice. And I'm like, what do you mean draw your couch? What? I didn't know you could do that. So in high school, so you had been exposed to that, and then uh, when you got to college, I mean, what were some of the influences that you had, artists that you were looking?
So in high school, I mean, I dove head first into painting once I just like learned about this world. I got to take a painting class for high schoolers at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I think
Oh, okay.
going to the Art Institute of Chicago, the museum, was incredibly influential for me in high school. And it's shaped my taste of today. And I saw a Lucian Freud painting. We had a teacher who showed us Lucian Freud and showed us Philip Guston. I think there was a big Cy Twombly show at the Art Institute at the time. And I had never really, like, that was the first time I got introduced to the idea of paint as flesh, or like paint as time, like depicting time through paint, and like seeing real paintings, like this built up, like monumental, crusty object that had all of this like philosophy or optical illusion tied to it. It was just like mind blowing for me as a high schooler. So I went
Yeah.
into college thinking that I wanted to paint like Lucian Freud. And I kind of accidentally went into a very conceptual and interdisciplinary program at the Kansas City Art Institute. Um, the program there is very, like, it's, everything is art, like everything is painting. Um, and I was, yeah, I mean, I was just exposed to so many different perspectives and ideas there intellectually that were really important to me now. Like man, in college, I mean, there's just so much in college. Like I was introduced to like the poetics of space by Gaston Bachelard, like Jungian archetypes, like, ecofeminism, perceptual painting as a
All of
whole
the
genre.
like just philosophical foundations that all of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
art movies are built upon. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't really initially gunning for that when I went to college. I was ready to like, I just wanted to go and like draw perceptually, or just keep doing what I was doing in high school, but more. But if I had gone to like a more traditional program, I would not have had the same um, intellectual cultivation that I did, and I'm grateful for it now.
Yeah, I think the that's that's really interesting. I totally agree with that, or can mirror that. Like I totally was with that experience because I went to a small sort of liberal arts college in undergrad, and so the part of our assignments, our drawing assignments, were reading assignments, and everything was framed around kind of a conceptual basis, and really, you know, uh, everything was about kind of pushing that, exposed to artists who were taking things like me drawing or me painting and redefining them. While I didn't end up doing that, I always was grateful, understanding the fact that like it's really important to know what came before you and what's happening. Because as a high schooler, I mean, you sounded like a very mature high schooler versus me, who was like going in and it just seemed like, yeah, that's what I want to make video games or something like that. So um but so did you go there through the entire 4 years?
Yeah, yeah, I went through the entire 4 years.
And then Kansas City's a cool place. I really like it. I mean, I only been there once, but it's the home of a lot of um it's got a huge artistic culture. It's when you look at it on the map, you think there's no way that anyone could have reached there. It was like but go there. It's got like music, it's got painting, it's got, I mean, Hallmark cards is there. I know that. And, um, even, artists like Mark English. I don't know if you're familiar with Mark English. Um, yeah, he was an illustrator. He's, uh, and actually started an illustration school with his son John, which is now a visual arts passage, which is podcast is under. So it's cool to see that there's another wrinkle in tapestry that is Kansas City. So but you decided to go to the West Coast to the Gage Academy. I mean, where did you find that out? Because I mean, you're younger than I am, but what year was that when you went to school?
Um, when I went to school at
Yeah.
Kansas City,
Yeah.
I graduated in 2014.
Okay.
So I
So
spent
it was, yeah.
quite a while in Kansas City before moving. Well, I guess that's just 4 years before moving to the West Coast. It was a long 4 years though. It felt like a lot happened, you know.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
excited to hear that you've been to Kansas City and that you can appreciate it. It's really like a gem in the middle of the country. It's
Yeah. It was explained to me that there's no outdoor activities there because everything is flat. And so people can't go travel out as like a recreational thing like you would Denver, something like that, or Washington State. So everyone just hangs out and invests in the arts is is what was explained to me. So like there's a huge love for the gallery scene there. I know I was used to be represented by a gallery there. Um, and
fun.
yeah, it's super cool. And the food's great. Can't beat the food.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The barbecue, the tacos, delicious.
Yeah. I didn't have the tacos. That was the one thing I didn't have, and people were saying you missed out. So I gotta go back. But graduating the years after graduation are, I mean, I remember the first 4 years after graduation felt like 40 years because of just like how much your life changes, right? Because like you don't even recognize yourself at the end of it. It's like, who was I? uh,
Yeah, what just
so
happened? What do I do now? Is that
right, right, right. So were you still kind of painting after school, or um you know well, you obviously were because you ended up going to Gage, but I mean, what was that like after graduating?
Yeah, I mean, after graduating, as you can imagine, um, I was pretty tired. So I just did, you need time to recover. So I just got pretty immersed in the atmosphere there. Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't really know what to do. Like I always had a drawing practice where, you go to the Nelson Atkins Museum and you sketch the art there, you sketch. Just sketching is just like something I've always done. And making little still life paintings here and there. But I didn't really know how to, there's still so much I didn't know about painting and like just the formal fundamentals of painting that I felt restricted by. So I spent most of my time there just enjoying the other types of art in the city. There were a lot of really colorful, interesting performance artists and house shows and just interesting people I graduated with, who were making like just really interesting installations and like just cool stuff. I wanted to just be around it and enjoy it. Um, so I knew I wanted to study painting more, and I knew about ateliers. And I'd always get online and look at ateliers around the country, around the world, and just, logistically figure out what I could do, like what I could swing. And I always looked at gauge because I had this Juliet Aristides book. She
Yeah.
has
Which one?
it's the classical painting book.
Oh
Um,
yeah, with the Paxton out in the front.
yeah, I wanted to do all the like cast painting and classical studies and all of that. It just seemed so like, unattainable for me. It just was
Yeah.
like to be able to arrange your life to be able to study full time like that. I had this kind of romantic idea about, just apprenticing with, becoming a master and all of that. So I did, when I was in Kansas City, I did a lot of, like, I printed out bark drawings
Oh
from
yeah.
computer and like tried to draw as many of those as I could, which was really helpful for training your eye. But yeah, that's how I settled on Gage. Is I knew about Juliet Aristides, and I looked around their website and I found Jeff Flack's. Jeff Flack is a wonderful draftsman here who teaches figure drawing atelier that's part-time, and Kimberly Trowbridge, the Trowbridge Atelier, which is a painting atelier that was also part-time. So I wanted to go study with them. Like I didn't know if I could really swing the full-time atelier at Gage, but the part-time ones they were affordable and I mean, I loved Jeff's drawings. I loved Kimberly's paintings. I knew they could help me. So I applied and I got a scholarship to go. So I left Kansas City.
Wow. That's man, I remember that book. I remember I came across it in grad school, but it's like water in the desert, right? It's like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted, but expanded. There's all these people that are you feel like you find your tribe with that stuff, especially the bark drawings. The Charles Bark drawings. For those of you that are watching that don't know, it was a drawing course in the 19th century that was developed by Jean-Léon Gérôme, and Charles Bark was the uh, printer, the photographer, and so historically, I guess one of the first students of the Bark course, and there were tons of other ones, but this one was really really popular, and so I guess it was developed. I've read somewhere it was developed for high school students uh, because the French government felt that there weren't art, taste wasn't being taught earlier enough,
Interesting.
and yeah, and it which is crazy, to think that. But the drawings are so awesome, and they're almost like you don't even need to know French to go through them because they're just a bunch of plates. So you that start off super simple and then go to the to the complex. Um, yeah, I drew the heck out of those things. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my God. So cool. Yeah. I actually got to see them an actual reproduction, like an actual print of a Arca print at the museum that's now closed, but it was called the Dahesh Museum, right? There with the Dahesh by any.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, so it was I think the director of the Dahesh was uh a person by the name of Peter Trippy, and he's the I think the editor in chief of Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. And so they had this whole exhibition of Charles Bark when the book came out. And I'm from Queens originally, so I went back home to try and see it, but I found out that the show it came down, and so they had some like 19th century Orientalist exhibit, which was even it was awesome because you got to see all these like Jerome's and Meissoniers and these awesome paintings. But in the gift shop, there were actual Charles Bark plates, which was like blew my mind. Just sort of it's like cardboard backed, 18 by 24 and cardboard backed and like a plastic um protector. I was like, I so wish I had the money at the time to get one. It was just having like a piece of history.
Yeah, it's crazy how pristine they are drawn. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, so hard too, right? Like you that's the funny thing. Like they look easy, don't they? Like it's like, oh, this is just an eye. That's like 3 lines. I got this. Go and try and do it. You're like, oh my goodness. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. Why I can't draw. I don't know what happened. Um so you go to the West Coast and you you get into did you go you said you got into Gage from there or got into the got a scholarship to the part-time ateliers.
so the part, so Gage is like the umbrella school, and the part-time ateliers are within Gage.
Oh, okay.
So,
See, I didn't know that it was
like,
broken up like that.
the Flack Atelier, I mean, there's quite a few different like tracks that you can go to within Gage, and then they also offer like elective classes to teach or to take.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went directly from Kansas City to Gage to the part-time ateliers.
Wow. So what was that like day one? I mean, it's been a trip.
Oh, it was so exciting. I was so happy to like just be in a place where like the standard, like the bar was just draw a realistic figure. um I think yeah, I mean it was just like so mechanical, like the just learning to draw in this really specific traditional way, and it was really fun. I was really hungry for that. Um and yeah, I did Jeff's atelier first, the drawing atelier. So I did a year of that, and then I did a year of Kimberly's painting program after that, and they're super different programs, but I had an idea that I could put them together in a way that would be useful to me. So like Jeff's more like form based, like, you know, rendering, turning form, learning figure construction, things like that. He studied at the New
Was
York
it
Academy of Art, and like so he had a
okay?
really strong academic background like that. And then
Yeah.
Kimberly is more has more of a modernist influence. You know, things are built through big just blocks of color and abstraction. And the you know, drawing is important, but like she thinks of drawing as like kind of differently. You know, it's more of
Mhm.
like an abstract design more than like a traditionally conceived form. So yeah, the putting those together and trying to um, use the tools that I learned from there has been really meaningful to me.
Yeah, that's quite the difference considering like um those two type of ways of doing things. I mean, but there's definitely that kind of line that connects the two. I mean, so was it the with the drawing one, was it mostly uh comparative measurement, observational, was it site size
It was a
type
little
of
both.
approach to things?
Jeff had us draw just a lot from the model. Um, so like and like with like a constructive drawing approach, just like learning how to, you know, think about the head as a cube, the pelvis as a cube. We like sculpted a little bit. And we did some bark drawings. We didn't do any cast drawings, but that was fine. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So that's the like yeah, kind of almost like Bridgman-esque uh Vanderpool type of these are the types of plane changes that happen and that which is and then you have I guess with the painting one it's more almost like Charles Hawthorne, um Dickinson
mhm.
type of like color notes, right? Like one next to another. That's how you turn the form, because everything's almost like optical in a
Exactly.
sense, right? Yeah. 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 No, I could totally see, when you look at, it's funny because when you look at like somebody like are you familiar with Henry Henschy's work?
I don't think so. Henry
So
Hen.
he was a Henschy, yeah. He was a Charles Hawthorne's um assistant, his monitor. And he ended up taking over the Cape Cod School of Art for a while. And he's very different from he's similar but yet pretty different from Edwin Dickinson, where like he's very, very colorful. Dickinson is obviously much more subdued in his palette, but he was uh his drawings, like his paintings, if you read his book, he has a book called Henchy on Painting, and it very much echoes Hawthorne on painting. And um but if you look at his drawings, you could tell that he was a sculptor in like, or he thought of things three-dimensionally as well, because they were very, very it looked like they were really form based, they're just like he understood with like as to where the zygomatic bone was, or where's the planes of the mouth, um all of those things. And so you could tell there's a lot of I could totally see the connection things, because it's almost like feedback, to know like you need to kind of the analytical structure. It's helpful to have it when painting like that, because you can kind of see with very little, when you're painting that, that planar, well, not even planar, but just that optically, that how much form you can actually go through with it. you know I don't know what I'm saying. I'm kind of rambling, but you get what I'm saying. Maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's been a big interest of mine is, you know, the play between that optical, abstract kind of world you can start with the Charles Hawthorne lineage, perceptual lineage, and then also being able to like pull out specificity like that, pull out form and like
Yeah,
sculptural
out of the
sense
sim
of form.
right, right. Yeah, it's like I I'm like always fascinated with that, like how much depth and atmosphere you can create with just so little. Uh, I mean, uh, of course, Dickinson, Hawthorne, but like you have just people like, well, like yourself. I mean, like this one, this is a classic. This painting basically just spells it out. It's like you could see the form in it, but how little is actually there, but how intensely it was observed. It's like you and Uglo, or like painters in that realm.
Yes, yes. Juan Uglo is obviously a big influence as well.
Yeah. Um, so your painting, obviously that must have been a quite the change for you, especially if you hadn't been exposed to that before. I mean, did you know that you wanted to paint the figure before going into the painting atelier?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had tried painting the figure all through college. And it was, yeah, I mean, I just didn't, I was doing it very intuitively. I had, um, yeah, I was always trying in college. I was taking on these like really ambitious projects, like large figure paintings and
Yeah.
drawings. I loved just like getting lost in the body, and just, yeah, like those moments, like, figure painters like Lucian Freud or Johan Uglo or Anne Gale or Philip Pearlstein, or just, where they really like are um, enjoying the structure of the body that was what made me want to paint. And in college, I also had this amazing instructor, Jesse Fisher and Scott Seabart, and they were they introduced me to the Renaissance painters and mannerism. And that whole period of history of like genre painting where there's just like delicious bodies and like just crazy abstract compositions. I was super into that stuff, but I just
Yeah.
didn't have really the chops to pull it off at the time.
Right. I mean that, you're not the first person to bring up both of those schools of thought and like and being a painter such as yourself. And I find it really interesting because it makes total sense to me. Like those mannerist paintings were really abstract in their design. You could totally see the entire gesture running. So many of them. It's just like an abstract painting with like hands and legs and heads, right? And like um, but uh, but like the same idea, you could see it in work or like in Anne Gale's work and like the super compositional things like I'm just thinking about do you know Dickinson's like the cello player? Ever seen that piece? Thing
Mhm.
is like it's almost like you could take a Renaissance painting and I guarantee you can line it up, just design wise with it. Um, and totally tell just how it's beautifully structured that type of stuff is. And um, those painters really took that concept and just looked through it with modernist lens and it came through that modernism kind of threw everything out. It just sort of um, remixed it sense, that's super cool. Super cool. So I think painting the figure is like, I mean, that's what I loved about getting into painting, which was like, I want to be like all the Sargent and all the 19th century painters and Renaissance. I mean, you see Rubens and Van
Oh,
Dyck and
yeah, it's a big influence.
yeah, just to see those physical things and to see also like people like Lucian Freud was big for me too early on in my painting days because it was like, oh my goodness, this is Rubens, but like singular figures, and you feel every single layer that was put into that,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
maybe if Rubens didn't clean his brushes, we would get like Lucian Freud.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
so. Yeah. Yeah, I loved that's what I one of my biggest takeaways from Lucian Freud is like every moment of the painting is like really intensely, sharply felt. So you don't even need to be painting a body to do that. You don't even need to be painting realistically to do that. I think it's just that like rigor of attention that was really interesting to me.
yeah, yeah, especially and then like and those work same thing. Like you would think, um, when I first saw it, I thought it was like they were fast paintings, and actually Claudia Rilling, uh, artist whom I both you know of Claudia's work, and Claudia was the first to show me his work and said, "How fast are these done?" She had told me it's like years. Everything is like precisely observed, felt, and like that color note was obsessed over arm, or underplane of the arm or something like. But you really feel like that type of painting you can't do fast. It just doesn't come out like that. It's definitely a product of the time spent on it. And the same thing for Lucian Freud. Do you ever read the Lucian Freud book, The Man with the Blue Scarf? I think it's called.
I haven't.
It's like it's written by a writer who posed for the painting, The Man with the Blue Scarf. I forgot so I'm blanking on the name. Um, but it basically was just a book about his time with Lucian Freud. And he said that he had to wear the same thing every single time, and that he washed the scarf so much that by the end, it's like it's gray.
So Lucian Freud wore the same scarf to paint
Well,
him.
the guy who posed for it wore
Okay.
the same blue scarf so many times that it just was like gray at the end. This like vibrant blue. And just like his eyewitness accounts of what Freud's studio was like. And he has photos of like other portraits that he was working on at the time. And um just like, wow, what a commitment. That's the thing I always get at. So which brings me to kind of your work. It like, was this kind of like the stuff that's on your website here, was this the type of stuff that was coming out of like the painting class that you took, or from those studies, was your work kind of like always like this, or in this vein, I should say?
No, so right out of the painting class, the pandemic hit and I started painting still lifes because I was alone a lot and that's what was around me. Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the stuff I made right out of the atelier. Um,
Yeah, I remember this piece. I remember seeing. Yeah, that makes total sense. Uh, these are beautiful. They remind me of so many great artists, especially like Susan Leichtman. I think
oh,
you ever heard of Susan Leichtman's work?
yes, of course. Huge fan.
Yeah. I could totally see, like, especially that the big cup of wine, just like this beautiful, like, on Randy-esque presence to something so simple. You know, uh, that's it's so hard to do. It's not a gosh, yeah, it's so hard to do.
Yeah,
Really
that's
beautiful
that's what I
stuff.
was after. Is like I had these simple objects, like I had these cups and things I thought were beautiful. And I wanted like they each kind of had a quality to me that reminded me of a personal story of mine, have like a personal symbolic significance. And I wanted to try to convey that like personal, intimate quality without like being literal about what that story is or what that symbol means to me.
Yeah,
So it's got like this kind of really like visceral painterly quality, like a Lucian Freud painting, but it has like a dreamy conceptual air is what
yeah,
I'm
I totally get.
going for.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I always I always talk about this every time I think of painting, because yeah, I feel the same way about I approach the subject matter, in a sense. Like, it's on Hawthorne on painting. I think he was talking to a bunch of students, or Hawthorne was talking to a bunch of students in this book, and he was saying, uh, "Don't paint things that are already beautiful. Like, that's not a mark of a good painter." He says, "You want to be great at painting, paint the beauty in something ordinary. It's like an old rusty pan. If you can make me care about that, see the beauty of it, then accomplish something in painting." And that's always stuck with me. This is like, this is it, in right before us, uh, just like, there's nothing to the actual subject, but what it's obvious that it means something, you know. I think that's the, without having it to be have some sort of grand grand narrative. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, um, yeah, this is the type of stuff that I always love. Like even like figuratively speaking too, like you look at like Catherine Kehoe's stuff. Do you know Catherine Kehoe's?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like just like a just like the self portraits, are just like, man, just maybe a dozen color shapes at most, and just like, wow. And then on the flip side, you have maybe 12,000 strokes, in Anne Gale, but like each one of them you could tell was put down with just this thought, uh, uh, and just careful observation, which is awesome. So you were doing a bunch of still lifes during the pandemic, and um, so did you start showing at this time? Because I think this is when, I think in 2021 is when I started to come across your work on Instagram. Because I remember the other ones that you had, some of the other ones that you had posted. Um,
Yeah, I think it was 2021 that I started, yeah, applying to shows. I started trying to branch out online to make community through painting. I think I started teaching that year as well. Um, yeah, things started happening in 2021. And I learned how I became more facile about painting because I was doing it so much. So I was able to make paintings more quickly. And um, I started looking more heavily at Edwin Dickinson's paintings and Leonard Anderson's paintings. And like I learned about the Jerusalem Studio School,
yeah,
and was like just really, really fascinated by how like gestural and simple you could make a painting.
right.
Um, and I was just, I wanted to develop the ability to like more of a shorthand with painting. So that's what I was working towards.
So was it just like you were giving yourself, how were you doing that? Like time constraints or limiting your tools?
Yeah, yeah, I would give myself time constraints. Like
Yeah,
those two like vase still lives. There, those were like I began, those were just on my kitchen table, and I knew I didn't have a lot of time to paint them because they were um, in a place where things are changing a lot. Um, and I don't, yeah, I wanted to just knock it out as quickly as I could. So um, that's what happened. And it was an exciting discovery to be able to be like, oh, yeah, you can totally do this. Like, so much of art making and painting is just like confidence and
yeah.
just a mental game more than
Isn't
skill.
it? Yeah. Oh my God. Isn't it? It's like it's so about how you frame things mentally. Uh and it so much so like yeah, like you were saying, like, oh, I don't have to spend a couple of weeks on this. I can gotta do this now. Oh, just pulled it off. Well, oh, why wasn't I doing this all along? It could be just like something that in the either painting you see or like a book you read, uh, where an artist says something and you're just like, oh, yeah, why didn't I think of that? Of course, so I totally get that type of what you're saying on that. So you were doing these almost, were these like kind of one session paintings, like Premier Coup style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mirku.
Um, yeah. Yeah. Jerusalem Studio Score. That's where, when people like whenever I got into Edwin Dickinson, everyone was saying that. All the all the YouTube videos that I was watching on former students of his, or uh or just people just talking that kind of like at that vein. Um so so then from these you just started, because I could definitely see like there was a shift, not just into like this really plainer, like it was always there in the previous ones, but these were, I don't outside of, I think in like almost like energetically wise, I think like you'd see a lot more of that confidence coming through, and just yeah, they're just they're simpler, but they're much more complicated at the same time. Now I noticed that you started to do things like in acrylics. That's one thing I wanted to ask you. So were you always doing when did that happen? Because these are all like on majority of these are oils, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
So
I
what?
so I had done some acrylic gouache paintings back in 2020. And I really, I mean, I was the way I was painting, I was just layering shapes and controlling transitions between the edges. So with acrylic painting, that just sped up the process. Because with oil painting, there's a certain limit, like, you can paint for so long, and then um, I'm sure Edwin Dickinson could do it in one session, but I mean,
Right, right.
I
For
wanted
us mortals.
I wanted that like layer, that like, palimpsest of time kind of look to my
Yeah.
paintings. And I discovered the paintings of Jeremy Miranda, and I was really excited by how he could make acrylic, like this kind of um, almost like lowbrow medium, feel so elegant and painterly. And I loved the like sharp, almost like digital kind of marks that you can get with acrylic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't completely switched to acrylic painting, but it's been a pretty big focus.
Yeah, it's got like this so funny that you said like it's got like a digital look. Like I totally get what you're saying, because I paint digitally quite a bit for like my illustration stuff. And so um it's like, yeah, that's why acrylics is such a cool medium, because you can get like a nice flat shape, just a little bit of an edge if you wanted to. Just gives it a little bit of character, where it's like in oils, if you were to try and layer it, it would activate itself and just like kind of fuse, which is awesome. But if you don't like that, then you wait for it to dry, and yeah, that's yeah, I totally get that. So were you working with did you switch up your tools? Like because were you working with like palette knives or anything like that during this time? Because I know I noticed a lot of them look like they were just like just a like these still lifes right here brushed with maybe a little bit of palette knife in these areas, but like just like you're just sort of setting large shapes down.
Yeah,
Um,
I have always worked. Well, yeah, I've pretty much always worked with palette knife. At least on the first layer, like just palette knife and brush kind of interchanged. I love like a real variety of kinds of marks on a surface. I think that's really exciting. And it just felt very intuitive, as you're responding to what you're seeing. Each moment is different, each tool could be different, each mark is different. And I mean, that's the consistency, is like you just, I don't know, you find like a rhythm to all of that that's really hard to uh like analyze and logically explain in a really clear cut way. You just kind of, I don't know, you have
yeah,
to wait
yeah,
for it. I always have
yeah. It's not.
like, do I use a palette knife now or a brush now? And I'm like, you just have to try it and feel it. Like there's no like every fourth mark you make a palette knife. I mean, it just has to be something you feel.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a it's a painting like this is not it's not like a gimmick. It's not a shtick, right? It's like it's really your responding. You're just
Mhm.
trying to be available as and open as much as possible um to try and capture a feeling. So which sounds, if you were to tell, you know, young Ray who was just getting into painting that, I'd be like, what? I wanna I want step one, step two, step three. And there is like you could totally do. There is a way to like obviously formally teach like a process, but like when it comes down to it, it's really getting into painting. It's just like, man, whatever works. Because sometimes what worked in one painting, it's not necessarily work in another uh, piece, and it could be the same subject matter, just different light, and have a completely different approach to it. So did you so when the pandemic um sort of things started to ease up and people started to come out, is that when you started to paint the figure a lot more?
Yes. So how do you
I
start
just got to go
painting?
to these studies here because they're just like these things are, I love these.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I started going to the open studio sessions at Gage as they, opened back up again. And I I learned that um I learned that you just need to practice. Like you just need to do a lot of images, quick images um from the figure, and that's how you can create um images that have vitality to them. Is like, when you make, say I do like so many of these like figure studies, and the the facility that you get from doing those, like you can make a mark that you'd never be able to make in like a slower painting in the studio. You have to like, come to a conclusion more quickly and succinctly in the life room. um
Also, you're feeling this just so interesting. Once somebody puts a timer on something and you're in the life room and you've got a model was imposed, it's just such a different energy. It's like a uh just I mean, at least when whenever I'm painting from life, it's like, why don't I have this all the time? This like willingness to just like I have to really fight for it. Where it's like it just comes natural. It's like, oh, I only got, I don't know, 20 minutes or three sittings, so I've got to get this thing in. And I can't be thinking about, well, I see a little bit of blue in here. Let me tweak this note. It's just the fact that you have, like someone physical is sitting in front of you, um, and not like a still picture. You have
mhm.
to kind of capture that essence as just truthfully as possible. And it's like I don't know, it's just such a different energy going into it. Um,
Yeah, it really
but
puts
yeah,
you in touch with your instincts as a painter,
yeah,
and it allows you to be more experimental because
right.
you're, blowing through paintings more. So you can try different things, try different kinds of marks, different materials. And through all of that experimentation, you can make discoveries about what you like, and um, what kind of rhythms you're finding, what kind of patterns you're finding, how you can translate the discoveries you make in one medium to another medium.
Yeah, I noticed the I'd love, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up like the sort of the collage uh So were you doing this from life as well, or like I love this one.
Thank you. That was from life. That one was from,
Yeah.
yeah.
How big was the stack of paper that you brought in?
It so I have like a binder with like clear slip covers. Um
Yeah.
just with a bunch of paper organized in different ways, different colors in there so I can flip through it. I made, a bunch of different colors in the Trowbridge Atelier, and then I also just like to go to the thrift store and collect weird colors of paper that I find. So it's just gives me a place to put all the stuff I've hoarded,
Right.
something creative with it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really smart way of getting rid of it. I could only imagine. I'd be like Amy didn't bring in any paints or anything. She just brought in a binder, some scissors, and some glue. What's going on here? It's like,
Oh, it's so fun. It's so
yeah, it
free.
looks awesome.
Collage just turn it just it's almost hard to make a bad collage. I mean, it's like that it just makes you make such harmonic decisions. I guess you can,
Yeah.
you can push it a little too far. I've made some bad collages. But I mean, like it's like a forced level of consistency. Your shapes are going to be flat, your edges are going to be similar. Um, and your materials are going to be limited. Like I've only got like 2 or 3 colors going on in that one. You pull from 2 or 3 pieces of paper. The limitation is key.
Yeah, that is a perfect summation of that. Rotation is key on that because because it doesn't matter what the medium is, right? Like if you had two colors and they weren't the right notes together, they're not going to be. It's not like switching a medium is going to make that harmony any better. It's just going to be wrong. Just look differently. So like if it works in collage, it's going to work in acrylics, and if those, if it works collage and acrylics, it's going to work in oils, and if it's going to work in all three of them, it's going to work digitally. Um, so on and so forth. I love the fact that the you get so much free stuff with the paper, like you were saying, like you don't have to worry about mixing enough paint because it's just right there.
Mhm.
Um, or just like having this wonderful texture here, uh, and having that overlap. You just get it for free. I mean, you don't even have to think about it. Uh, and it makes total sense why artists or collage is a great. It's really just shape based art making. And I love these like these color pencils as well, like this.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a demo I did for the Modern Color Atelier, formerly the Trowbridge Atelier that I was talking about. That's a drawing from a collage that I did of a Rembrandt painting.
Oh yeah, I know the paint.
So the goal of
Nice.
the assignment was to try to get the students to draw in like a really blocky, plainer way in color.
Yeah.
And so to copy, it's hard to do that like directly from a source with a lot of form modeling. So the idea
Yeah.
was flatten it, abstract it with collage, and then try to just draw your collage more literally to force yourself to see things in that flattened way.
It's a really that is a really interesting way of being able to analyze that. Because I know if I were to try and do it, I would be feel so restrained or feel the need to kind of um be truthful to the source, especially Rembrandt, right? It's like, who am I to change the colors? But
Yeah,
if
they're
it
so
were
beautiful. It's hard not to just wanna to merge with it completely.
right, right, yeah. So, uh, with your other your figure paintings, these, I mean, obviously seem like they're take a lot more time. Um, they happen over the course of a lengthier period of time, but the are these from life as well, or are you uh, working from some photo reference? You work from memory or drawings, or
It's all of it.
yeah,
I Yeah, these are my friends. These are not hired models. So they came in and they sat for me for enough time for me to do some drawings and a color study, like a smaller color study from life, so I can get just to distill the chaos of reality, just a piece of raw data to work with.
okay.
And then I did use, conventions like, knowledge about figure construction and how light work, like form lighting and color theory and photographs to just kind of bring the image to a resolution.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be. I mean, there's no photograph that exists that you could. There's no way of taking a photograph that it looks like this. Obviously. So it takes so much of your experience to kind of capture all of these harmonies that are going on. The way that you also played with the flatness of the wallpaper coming. I got a chance to sit in on a talk that um, John English, who runs Visual Arts Passage, did with Zoe Frank.
Oh,
Um, and as Zoe was talking about the same thing, just like that when she was asked that question, she gave the answer that I figured that you were going to give too. It's like, how do you put this together? Is this from reference, from life? Is it from memory? And it's like all of the above, because different parts require us, different solutions. They're not gonna be the same. You're not gonna. She was saying, I'm not gonna go back to the same source if it's not giving me what I want. So I'm gonna switch it up. And she talked about like making stencils, pasting that on, and just putting that in, and then picking it out, and then painting over it, and taking a photo here, and then a, a paint, an image of a photo of a painting that she had there, and just like, yeah, melding everything together and setting up a still life so that could be in the corner. Uh, it's really like a kind of captures a span of time. It really truly, painting like this really, it's like, wow, this is like a moment in this person's, artist's life, and that was spent, right, done in acrylic oils or whatever. Um, this is sizable. I mean, at least for me, I know it's 30 by 40. I mean, how long did something like this take you?
it took me a long time.
Yeah.
I was working on it for the better part of a year. I mean, not every day, but it takes time to kind of find, like, to problem solve certain things too and make decisions for me.
Yeah, me too. Because it's just, at a certain point when you're working on a painting, right? It's like once your eyes tire, and you just it's useless to keep working on it, because you're just sort of numb, just like more apt to destroy something that's working, by just throwing something in or falling back to bad habits. So yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I just love this shift that you have from like shoulder to the hair, back to the other color of the hair. That's like with that undertone of green. Ah, that's so good. And putting in the this is part of the show where I gush about your paintings. I'm comparing you. Uh, uh, where you have sort of the flatness, and you're painted out some of it, and uh left some of it in. And I mean, are you scraping back into this, or like sanding back in, or
Yeah, I did some sanding I did some scraping. There, you know, the texture builds up and sometimes it doesn't, it sort of competes with the image. So I'll knock it back where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
It
love
just
how
creates,
it can reveal layers from the past as well.
yeah, I was literally just going to say that. It's like, it's such a great way of showing the history of the piece. Uh, Even something like, I just love this, like this pass right here. That's so cool. That is so cool. See that going, uh, composition. I mean, some of these like, and they're all not, it's interesting. Are you setting up like when I take a piece of reference, I know right off the bat that I am changing every single color. Just because I know like the photo is just not gonna, it's just awful when it comes to just giving me the color that I saw. Just because it doesn't have the dynamic range, it doesn't even the values need to be tweaked. So, um, are you doing? Is that the same thing with you, or are you I guess capturing kind of like letting the color photo maybe key or a given setup key, like you're still whether it's not photo or life, you're setting up kind of the lighting conditions for it.
Um, so I will use the colors I see, but there's usually some kind of like harmony or something that I'm extrapolating on in the relationships that I'm seeing. Like there's like a, you know, like the colors in this portrait, for example, like the green was there. I mean, some of the colors were there. The light quality was warm. But her skin was not quite like that, and like her facial features are not like that at all. And yeah, it was just like a push and pull of like how to keep the color relationships like simple, but also like capture this feeling that I was trying to mine.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like it's loosely based. I mean, it's based in reality. It's based on my observation. Like I couldn't probably have invented this arrangement of colors, but it's like I've taken it and I've like kind of um, done something with it.
Right. 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 Yeah, I know what you mean. Like you're painting the feeling that came from that first inspired you to paint the thing anyway. It's like painting the trying to get as possible to the source.
Mhm.
Which which
Yeah.
is yeah, and source is like this intangible thing. Um I mean, it's not it's that you're that doesn't come from any one place. And that's cool. That's so cool that you're. I mean, this is the type of stuff. When I saw this, I was like, oh, man, like why didn't I just do this? It's just it's so smart. Like you had these bands of color, and then you broke up this, played with the edge right here, like incredible lost and founds in this area, and just like that high contrast note here. But what was going on to support this? It's like, man, hitting those that must have been hard. I mean, I don't see the struggle in it. It's just more so me like, man, I think about myself, where I'm like, boy, that would have taken me about 40 tries to get maybe this note to play nicely with that note. Um, for like and like that little really nice note for this the clavicle right here, right where that pit of the neck is. That's it's like you can feel it there, but it's just the slightest of changes. Awesome. And so these so with the smaller ones, I mean, like the larger ones take, I mean, sorry, did this one here that was 16 by 20, did this take just as long as that 30 by 40?
No, it didn't take quite as long, but it did take me a long time because this one, I made a color study from life. I made a drawing from the photograph I took, and in the drawing, I took some artistic liberty with the value structure. And then, but it was super different. The value structure in the drawing is super different than what I was seeing. So it took me a while to figure out how to get the moodiness in the drawing to work in color. Yeah, it took a long time to figure out like how to paint the face too. Cause it's like I would paint the face just like my friend's face. And it just would
Yeah.
be too explicit or something. It just didn't feel good. Like it just felt wrong. So just like actually forming the features to be this like kind of somewhat specific, somewhat idealized kind of doll face. Like it was a search for sure. Like it just
Yeah.
took me a long time to figure out how to dig out the quality I wanted it to have. And then in the
Yeah.
small portraits, those are all one session paintings. Um,
Wow.
I had been Now for that one, I had warmed up quite a bit. I did like several fast paintings first. Um, but then I just sat there and painted it um, in acrylic. That's the beauty of acrylic, because you can just kind of go from big to small in one session and it's all dry. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
that one was more it was less like internally motivated.
Right. Right. Yeah. You could totally tell like the feeling of this piece is like it feels like a self-portrait, whereas this is about the whole painting. There's a shape of a face that happens to be there, but it's about this whole dance. That's something I struggled with once I learned how to paint the head. When I realized like how to get a likeness, all of a sudden it was hard for me to not paint a head with the aim of getting a likeness, you know?
Yeah, I still struggle with that.
Oh my God. It's like, well, no, the nose is not right. And like, no, the mouth's a little bit higher and you just like,
Right. Like if you want to make like an allegorical like portrait, like you don't want it to be literally like your face. It's like no. Or your friend's exact likeness. Like it just doesn't belong to that world. It just makes it so I just cringe because I've done it before. It just
oh
doesn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God. I mean, it's just like I was a professional at doing that. It's just and you could see like everyone like you can see the difference between paintings that try and do allegorical pieces but have likenesses in them that kind of they almost distract from the overall story because it's like you could tell it's a person rather than a symbol that is a character in the story of the whole painting. That's really what sets apart those those paintings from each other.
Yeah,
um
I get super excited about like Edwin Dickinson's paintings for this reason. Like
yeah.
he will paint like specific features, but they all kind of look similar. Like they all kind of have this like ghoulish proportion, or he doesn't paint the features at all. It's just like the mask. It's not
Right.
necessary. So like the painting can become this sort of like anonymous mood rather than a portrait.
Yeah.
And I also think about um, like the Renaissance painters, they painted scenes, allegorical scenes. None of them used photographs, and they all had likenesses, but it's like they all had like a mannequin that they would use, like a mannequin face, so they could
Right.
use it as a tool rather than try to like, make it like a portrait.
Right. That's a some just as an illustrator, I've run across like painters like Howard Pyle and NC Wyeth. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they've done like just massive like battle scenes, and some of the figures are just smears. Look at them, and when you're a painter going into, there's one thing to look at them and be like, oh, that's awesome. That's just 3 strokes. But it's another thing when you're doing it in your own paintings, you have to remember, like, I have to dial this back, and with me, I can't do that on the fly. Like, okay, I'm going to knock this back here. So like, I have to overpaint it to know that, like, okay, let me just take out 3/4 of this, uh, um,
Thank
most of
you.
my painting, and yeah, it's like most of my painting, the tail end of my painting, um, on a piece is usually just taking out stuff that I, for some reason, decided to obsess over. Um, so that's it makes me feel better that you go through the same thing.
Oh, for sure. One day we'll learn how to just, show some restraint in the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Get the
Yeah,
abstraction down and only pull out what we need. But
right. The second I do, I'm calling you up, being like, "You did it." Um, so at this point, I mean, were you always showing? I know you're showing at galleries now, but were you showing at galleries around the 2020, 2021 realm time frame, or is this something fairly new?
it's newer. I yeah, at 2020 I was pretty just fresh out of the Trowbridge Atelier. So just finding my bearings as a painter, working towards putting together a body of work that I could approach galleries with.
That's that's a really important thing point to bring up. Is I at least I felt like that even in school. Like, I had a portfolio coming out of school, but they it almost felt like they were fabricated pieces to represent a portfolio, if that makes sense. Like, it was a lot of my work was really exercises that were, meant to apply the things that I had learned. And when you come out of school, you realize, like, and you're left to your own devices, it's like there's a really need to go to that search, because otherwise you just end up doing more of those class exercises same way, kind of continue. Well, there's a danger of doing that. um Never really quite get to what it is that you like about painting. But so yeah, that's I mean, I could totally see that if your body, I mean, something like this, I know, just for those watching, if you're in school and you're coming out, uh this is not like, you're not going to come out as a full-fledged artist. Like, this is a product of a lot of searching and a lot of just a lot of time. So I think that's the important thing. It's just like, you need to give yourself time to kind of figure out who you are. You can't do it in a accelerated rate. I mean, have you found that, like, even just when now going back to teaching? I mean, that's something I realized out advice I was giving quite a bit to people coming out of school. You know, you're not going to be the painter who you are now is not going to exist in 3 years, because you're just going to completely evolve to something else that is, you can't anticipate. It's you know you're by yourself, and you're waking up in the morning and you're saying, okay, who am I? Asking yourself those questions. I think in school, like, you have teachers helping you along with that, but when you don't have that support system, um, it forces you to ask different questions, which I think is crucial to development of an artist.
Yeah, I think that it takes time. I don't think that I've arrived by any means. I'm still exploring and experimenting with my style, and what um, yeah, like what I'm doing with the figure, what I'm doing with perception. I think I've just only started, spooning out the top of the iceberg. Um, and I think that's really exciting. I love seeing the development of artists over time, like artists in their 50s, who have bodies of work that I just, I'm like, wow, like how do you make something so solid conceptually and technically? It's just, and you
Yeah.
look at their earlier paintings and it's just a different world. And it's really inspiring. And I'm excited to, um, yeah, like I'm just excited to, like, I think about myself as like a painter in my 40s or a painter in my 50s. And like, I'm really curious. I'm excited to take the journey with myself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
anybody who's like um in art school or like, feeling a lot of pressure to find their style or find their gimmick or whatever. I mean, I know it's different if you're trying to work in illustration or graphic design or something and you need to like dial in your business. But I mean, you're such a limitless, you know, portal of ideas and perceptions. Like it's just going to take so much time to figure out like what you're about. I
Right.
I was
Yeah.
listening to this podcast interview with this painter I love, Shangra Majumdar, and
Oh,
that
I was just gonna bring them up.
was,
It's just
isn't
good.
he?
Those mushrooms reminded me of his remember those paintings he used to do of like just cables on the floor, cables
Oh
on
my
a
God.
studio floor.
Yeah,
Just
everybody
like
loves him. He's amazing. But and he's a great example, like he was perceptually just super gifted and like made all of these paintings that aspiring perceptual painters look at and treasure over and over again. And then he totally evolved into like, I mean, he might say, I don't know what he would say. I don't want, but it's like the way his work looks now is like different than the way it used to look,
yeah,
for example. Is all
yeah, yeah.
but he said on this podcast, he said like as a like young painter, like just give yourself time to make your work because it's just going to take time for you to lose a lot of affectation from your influences and figure out what you're about and who you are. And um, I don't know. I think there's a comfort in that, just like knowing it's going to be a process.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true because you like, coming in as a student, I always felt the need to have a fixed vision in my portfolio of who I am and who that person was going to be my career. Because all the people that I was looking at, I was just seeing the end product of their careers. I was just saying, okay, this is who they were. But I forget to, you would forget like students many students often do this, get the, what is like painting for 4 years. I remember my teachers telling my one teacher, Craig Nelson, he would say like, I've been painting for 40 years. And like, I'm 24 and like, I was like, I haven't even live. Like, you've been painting more than like almost twice the amount of time I've been alive. Um, and I understand that now, because I just turned 40 and coming into he's totally right, about like seeing. I love that what you said, seeing your affectation for your influences because you kind of got to shed all that stuff, and can't do it fast. I mean, I can't do it fast. I mean, I don't think it just takes time. It just takes time. And I've seen actually the flip side when that doesn't happen, which is you end up painting stuff, especially if you get successful commercially out of school, you end up painting stuff that the same stuff that you were doing in school, and then you end up almost like resenting the work because in that time span you've outside of school you've just evolved so much that who that person was is like, oh, that was just like, that was just a stepping stone. I know like commercially you can get locked into that and feel obligated to produce more works by that artist, that always would scare the crap out of me, in terms of like becoming a pastiche of yourself.
Totally. Yeah, I think about that too. Um, yeah, I want to avoid that. And I look at painters like Edwin Dickinson again, or like Leonard Anderson, or like painters that um, are working from life, like working perceptually in a way that I'm interested in, but they built like a poetic world that was big enough to encompass so many of their interests. So they could kind of like move through motifs and move through maybe like innovations they were making within their style, but it still feels like authentic to their experience.
Totally.
It's not like,
Totally.
oh,
Totally.
I'm gonna make I've set the parameters and now I'm just gonna use Sharpie markers and draw cups and use a little bit of green. Um, and like I'm gonna get famous for this style that I've created. Like, I feel like that would just really suck after a while
Yeah.
to even if you were really successful at making something super consistent.
Right.
Like
Yeah. Because
really
there's no discovery. Like you rob yourself of that, like the joy of learning something new that you
yeah,
didn't know before.
yeah. I feel like this, learning about the color spotting method and like Charles Hawthorne and um, like just perceptual working, with spots of color. There's so much freedom within that. Like there's so much you can do with that materially, conceptually, like um, just visually. There's so much you can pull out and push down. And you're still, I mean, you're thinking in shapes, you're thinking in um, color relationships. So, I mean, that's the most consistency I feel committed to. But I'm excited to see how that will like change for me over time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm excited too, for you. And I think that's a perfect place to end it, actually. Um, I think that it's been an absolute joy just to have you go through uh and chat about your work and just talk about painting. And I could tell that, it's like I can't wait to see what you do next. So thank you so much for taking the time out, Amy, chatting with chatting with us. I know you're a super busy person, so uh, I'm glad that the stars aligned and we were able uh, to chat.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's super great to talk to another painter.
Yeah, yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun. We spend so much time locked in our studios, so it's nice to know that somebody else is as interested in just these like intangible things like color spot and harmony and things like that. And we don't think we're a bunch of weirdos.
Yeah, it's nice to nerd out with someone.
Right. Yeah. 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 Thanks for the geek out session. I really appreciate it. Anyway, so thank you again, Amy, and thank you everyone for watching this. If you made it to the end, we'd appreciate a like and a subscribe on YouTube or subscribing to podcasts, apps of choice. Helps grow the podcast. And yeah, I guess we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.